The mysterious invitation. It was an ordinary day in the vastness of space when the transmission came through. The communication system on the human spacecraft beeped urgently, interrupting his daily routine. He was far from any familiar star system, traveling through the uncharted corners of the galaxy. He had no reason to expect any form of communication, especially not from someone he knew. Yet here it was. A message. The message was short, but carried a certain weight to it. You are invited to visit my home. I have urgent need of your help. A friend from the past. His first instinct was to dismiss it. After all, there were countless dangers in the galaxy. Stranger things had happened, and trust was a rare commodity. But then the name flashed across the screen, an alien name he recognized. It was from her. He had met the alien woman years ago during an incident on a distant moon. She was part of a peaceful alien race, known for their wisdom and ancient knowledge. Back then, she had been injured, and he had been the one to help her. Despite the differences in their species, there had been an unspoken bond between them. She had seemed grateful, but also distant, as if she carried a secret too heavy to share. Now, years later, that bond was the reason for this sudden invitation. His mind raced. Why now? Why after all this time? And what did she need from him? The message was clear, yet cryptic. She needed his help, urgently, but didn't specify what the problem was. A part of him felt uneasy. If she had truly needed help that badly, why not reach out sooner? Why go through the effort of contacting him after so many years? He decided to investigate. Setting his course for the coordinates provided in the message, he activated the ship's systems and prepared for the journey. His heart raced, not from fear, but from anticipation. There was always a sense of excitement when it came to the unknown, and this invitation felt like a door opening to something beyond his understanding. As his ship traveled through the stars, the vast emptiness of space felt even more profound. The silence was deafening. The closer he got to the destination, the more a strange tension seemed to fill the air, like a storm waiting to break. The stars outside his window looked unfamiliar. He was entering a region of space no human had ever charted. And then the planet appeared. It was like nothing he had ever seen before. A lush green world, its surface covered with expansive forests, towering mountains, and strange, sparkling rivers. He could feel the hum of energy in the air as his ship descended through the atmosphere. It was as if the planet itself was alive, brimming with power. But despite its beauty, there was an underlying sense of something more, something ancient, hidden beneath the surface. His ship landed gently on the alien planet's surface, the craft's landing gear scraping softly against the ground. He looked out the window and saw her, waiting for him. She stood tall, her figure silhouetted against the light of the strange sky, her radiant skin glowing in hues of blue and silver. Her eyes met his through the ship's window, and for a brief moment, everything else seemed to fade into the background. As the ship's hatch opened, he stepped onto the planet's soil. The air was thick with the scent of unfamiliar flowers, their fragrance filling his senses. The planet seemed alive in ways that Earth could never be, its natural energy pulsing through the very ground he stood on. Yet despite the beauty of the world around him, something felt off. There was a strange heaviness to the air, an unspoken warning that lingered, unnoticed by most. The alien woman approached him slowly, her movements graceful and deliberate. Her face was serene, but her eyes held a deeper sadness, a glimmer of something troubling hidden beneath her calm exterior. "Welcome," she said, her voice soft but carrying an undeniable weight. "I'm glad you came. There is much to explain." He nodded, though his heart began to pound in his chest. He had many questions, but now was not the time for them. Something was different about her, about this planet, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking straight into something far more dangerous than he could ever imagine. "You've come at a time of great need," she continued, her eyes flicking toward the distance, as if she were sensing something out of view. "I have been waiting for you." The invitation had been brief, but now, standing before her, it felt like everything had been leading to this moment. He was about to learn the truth. And as she led him toward the depths of her strange, alien home, he couldn't help but wonder, what had he truly walked into? What had he come to discover? And most importantly, was he prepared for the secrets that lay hidden inside this alien world, waiting to change everything he thought he knew about the universe? A warm welcome, but something's off. As the human stepped inside the alien woman's home, the air around him seemed to shift, thick with an unspoken tension. Her home was nothing like he had expected. It wasn't the grand palace of a ruler or the cold, sterile walls of a spaceship. No, it was far more intimate, a large, sweeping structure that seemed to grow organically from the planet's surface. The walls, a mixture of natural materials and strange alien metals, shimmered softly, pulsing with an eerie, bioluminescent glow. She led him down a long corridor, each step he took echoing off the smooth stone floor. The design of the place was both beautiful and unsettling, with intricate patterns carved into the walls, symbols he couldn't understand, yet they somehow felt familiar. He couldn't shake the feeling that these markings were more than just decoration. They seemed to hold meaning, secrets, something hidden in plain sight. His thoughts were interrupted by her voice, smooth and melodic. "This place was built long before my time. My people have lived here for millennia. And yet, we've only just begun to understand what lies beneath." Her words piqued his curiosity, but he remained silent, observing her closely. There was a certain grace to her, but it wasn't just her outward beauty that caught his attention. There was a stillness in her, an unnatural calmness that sent a shiver down his spine. It wasn't the kind of serenity that comforted him. It felt more like a mask, hiding something far darker. They reached a large chamber, its high ceilings adorned with glowing crystals that cast strange, shifting shadows across the room. The center of the room was dominated by an ancient-looking table, its surface covered in complex designs. On the far wall was a massive window, offering a breathtaking view of the planet's vast forests and glowing rivers. The view was stunning, yet the sight of it made him feel small, insignificant, a mere speck in the grand scheme of things. She gestured toward a seat at the table. "Please sit. We have much to discuss." He took the seat, his eyes never leaving her. She had been welcoming, but something about the way she had invited him, so eager yet so guarded, struck him as strange. The warm smile she wore felt rehearsed, as if she had practiced this moment for years. It was too perfect, too controlled. "I'm sure you're wondering why I've asked you here," she said, sitting across from him, her gaze steady and unblinking. "It's not just a matter of help. It's something far more important." He nodded, his mind racing. He had wondered about that. Why him? Why now? After all these years of silence, what could possibly be so urgent? She continued, her voice soft yet firm. "You are one of the few humans who have ever ventured into this part of the galaxy. You are someone who has seen things most of your kind cannot even begin to imagine. That is why I need you." He leaned forward, his curiosity growing with every word. "What do you need me to do?" Her gaze darkened slightly, the warmth of the room suddenly feeling colder. "I need you to help me unlock a power that has been hidden here for centuries. A power that could change the course of our universe." He sat back, his mind processing her words. Hidden power. She had to be referring to the strange artifacts and devices scattered throughout her home. But what kind of power could possibly be so dangerous that it required a human to uncover it? And why would she trust him with it? "Unlocking this power will not be easy," she said, her tone now serious, almost too serious. "There are forces in this galaxy who will stop at nothing to claim it. They would kill to possess it." His pulse quickened. There was no mistaking it now. Whatever this was, it was far more than he had bargained for. She wasn't just asking for help. She was dragging him into something much larger, something that had already attracted the attention of dangerous enemies. Before he could ask another question, the ground beneath them trembled, a low hum vibrating through the walls. He glanced at her, but she remained unfazed, as if she had expected this. "It's them," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the growing sound. "They found us." The tremors intensified, and the lights in the room flickered ominously. The peaceful serenity of her home was gone, replaced by the cold, harsh reality of impending danger. His heart raced. There was no turning back now. The invitation, the strange power, the danger, it was all leading to something he wasn't prepared for. And as he stared into the alien woman's eyes, he realized that everything he thought he knew was about to change forever. The calm, beautiful woman who had invited him here was hiding something much darker than he could have ever imagined. And now he was tangled in a web of secrets that had been centuries in the making. Hidden secrets beneath the surface. The tremors in the ground subsided, but the unsettling feeling lingered in the air. The alien woman's face had become more serious, her gaze shifting toward the door, as if anticipating something or someone. The hum of energy in the room was unmistakable, growing louder with each passing second. The human couldn't ignore the strange feeling deep in his gut. The tension in the air, the dark secret she had hinted at. It was all becoming clearer now. Something was terribly wrong, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he had walked straight into the heart of a storm. "Stay close to me," she said, her voice calm but firm, as if she had faced this kind of danger before. She stood up from the table and motioned for him to follow. "There is no time to waste. You need to see it for yourself." He hesitated, but the urgency in her tone pushed him forward. As they moved through the corridors, he couldn't help but notice how the walls seemed to shift around them. The architecture was both alien and ancient, like the building itself had been alive at one point. The faint glow of the walls seemed to pulse in time with his heartbeat, making the entire structure feel as if it were holding its breath. They reached a large, circular door at the end of the hall. The door was made of a strange, dark material, with intricate symbols engraved all over it. He had seen similar markings on the walls, but now, as he stood before the door, the symbols seemed to shimmer with an energy of their own. She placed her hand on the center of the door, and the symbols glowed brighter. The door slowly creaked open, revealing a hidden chamber beyond. The human followed her into the room, his senses on high alert. The chamber was unlike anything he had ever seen. It was vast, with a ceiling that seemed to stretch endlessly upward, its walls lined with ancient, towering shelves filled with strange artifacts and glowing objects. In the center of the room stood a massive stone pedestal, its surface covered in more of those glowing symbols. On the pedestal lay a large cylindrical object, pulsating with an energy that seemed to vibrate through the very air around them. "This is it," she said, her voice low, almost reverent. "The power I spoke of. The artifact that has been hidden here for centuries." The human approached the pedestal cautiously, his eyes fixed on the strange object. He could feel the energy emanating from it, a strange mix of power and danger. It was unlike anything he had ever encountered, and he instinctively knew that it wasn't meant to be trifled with. "What is it?" he asked, unable to keep the curiosity out of his voice. She glanced at him, her eyes dark with unspoken fears. "It is an ancient power, older than anything in this galaxy, a power that can reshape the fabric of reality itself. It was buried here to keep it from falling into the wrong hands. But now, I fear those hands are coming for it." She paused for a moment, her gaze flickering toward the entrance of the chamber, as if she could sense someone approaching. The human's heart raced. He could feel it too, an oppressive presence lurking just beyond the walls. "They will come for it," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper, "and they will stop at nothing to claim it. I've spent my life protecting it, but now I can no longer do it alone. I need your help." The human felt a shiver crawl down his spine. The urgency in her voice was impossible to ignore, but there was something else, something in the way she spoke, something in her eyes that suggested she was hiding more than she was willing to reveal. "What do you need me to do?" he asked, his voice steady despite the storm of questions swirling in his mind. She stepped forward, her hand hovering over the artifact. I cannot unlock its power alone. But with you, we may be able to awaken it. Only a human can do it. You're the key. The words hung in the air, and for a moment, time seemed to slow. The weight of her statement pressed down on him. He had always thought of himself as an explorer, a traveler, but now, standing in this hidden chamber, he was faced with something much larger than his wildest imaginations. The fate of this entire planet, perhaps even the galaxy, seemed to rest in his hands. He swallowed hard, trying to steady his breath. And if I unlock it, what happens then? Her eyes met his, and for the first time, he saw the full depth of fear in her gaze. The power could be unleashed, but so could the consequences. There are forces in the galaxy that will use it for destruction, forces that will stop at nothing to claim it. If they find out we are trying to unlock it. Her words trailed off, and he could feel the weight of the silence. There was no need for her to say more. He understood the danger, but he also understood the responsibility that had just fallen upon his shoulders. He was no longer just a visitor on this planet. He was now part of a much bigger story. Before he could respond, the walls around them began to tremble once again, this time more violently. The ground beneath their feet shook, and the faint sound of distant voices filled the air. The enemies were closing in. We don't have much time, she said, her voice urgent, pulling him back to the present. We must act now, together. As they both stood before the pedestal, the human knew one thing for certain. Whatever happened next, nothing would ever be the same again. The dark truth revealed. The tremors that had shaken the chamber only grew stronger, reverberating through the walls, rattling the very foundation of the alien structure. The human felt the pulse of fear and uncertainty in his chest, but there was no turning back now. The strange power in the center of the room beckoned him, and with it, the heavy burden of responsibility. The alien woman's hand hovered just above the artifact, her fingers trembling as if she, too, feared the power it contained. She turned to him, her face pale, her eyes wide with a mixture of desperation and regret. There's more you need to understand, she said, her voice shaking. The artifact isn't just an ancient power. It's a weapon, a tool that could tear apart the very fabric of the universe itself if it falls into the wrong hands. And the ones who are coming for it, they will use it for total destruction. The human's mind raced. Destruction. He had assumed the power was simply dangerous, but now it sounded far more catastrophic. He took a step closer, his eyes fixed on her, trying to piece together the pieces of this confusing puzzle. Who are they? Who's coming for it? He asked, his voice tight with urgency. She hesitated, as if the truth weighed too heavily for her to speak. When she finally met his gaze, there was a sorrow in her eyes that made his heart ache. They are a faction of my own people, she whispered, her voice barely audible. A radical group that believes in the supremacy of our race. They see the artifact as the key to unlocking godlike power. If they gain control over it, they will use it to dominate the galaxy, to crush anyone who dares oppose them. And they won't stop until they have it. The human recoiled, his mind reeling with the implications of her words. A faction of her own people. The very ones who had invited him here, who had been kind and seemingly peaceful, were now enemies. He felt betrayed, confused. How could this be? Was everything a lie? Was he just a pawn in a much larger game? I thought you were different, he muttered under his breath, though he wasn't sure if he meant it to be heard. She heard him, though, and her expression softened with regret. I never wanted you to be a part of this. You were just a messenger at first, someone who could help me protect this planet. But now it's far too late for anything less than the truth. The room shook again, more violently this time, and the hum of energy surrounding the artifact grew louder, almost deafening. The alien woman stepped back, her eyes scanning the walls in search of something he couldn't see. She was on edge, her calm facade cracking, revealing the true extent of the fear and panic that had been simmering beneath the surface. "We need to act quickly," she said, her voice tense. "The radical faction is closing in. I thought we might have a little more time, but we don't. If we don't stop them, they'll seize the artifact, and it will be the end of everything we know." She looked at him, a silent plea in her eyes. It was clear now that she had been keeping secrets, but in the face of the impending threat, she was no longer hiding them. "The truth is," she continued, her voice trembling slightly, "the artifact was never just a weapon. It was created by an ancient civilization long before either of our races existed, a civilization that disappeared, leaving only this power behind. They foresaw the chaos that would come if such a force were to fall into the wrong hands. That's why it was hidden here, in the deepest vaults of my people's history. But now that history is being rewritten by those who seek to control it." The human's mind struggled to process everything she was saying. An ancient civilization, a weapon so powerful that it could unravel the fabric of the universe itself. The weight of it all felt suffocating, as though the very air around him was growing thicker with each passing moment. "You're telling me," he said, his voice strained, "that this artifact is not just a tool of destruction, but the last remnant of a long-lost civilization. And you expect me to help you unlock it, to give it power?" She nodded solemnly. "Yes, but it's not just about unlocking it. It's about controlling it. We have to ensure that the artifact is sealed away again before anyone can use it. If the wrong people get their hands on it, they'll destroy everything. It's the only way to save not only this world but the entire galaxy." The human was silent for a moment, trying to understand the magnitude of her words. Everything about this situation screamed danger, and he had already seen enough to know that the stakes were far higher than he had anticipated. But the question remained, could he trust her? Could he trust anyone in this place? Before he could voice his doubts, the lights in the room flickered, and the air grew colder. The walls shook once more, but this time, it wasn't just the tremors from the artifact's power. The human could hear the faint sound of approaching ships, a metallic, relentless hum that filled the air with a sense of dread. "They're here," she whispered. "We don't have much time." He turned toward her, his pulse quickening. The reality of the situation hit him like a wave. They were about to face the very forces she had warned him about, and the only thing standing between them and total chaos was the artifact in the center of the room. And him. The question was no longer whether he could trust her, but whether he could trust himself to make the right choice. The enemy was at their doorstep. The clock was ticking, and the only way forward was to unlock the power of the artifact, no matter the cost. The danger escalates. The walls of the chamber shook violently, and the hum of the approaching enemy ships grew louder, vibrating through the floor beneath their feet. The human's pulse raced, the weight of the moment crashing down on him. The room seemed to close in, its eerie glow casting long, distorted shadows across the stone walls. Every fiber of his being screamed for him to act, to do something, but the alien woman stood frozen in front of the pedestal, her gaze fixed on the artifact, as if she were in a trance. "This is it," she said, her voice barely a whisper, trembling with urgency. "We have no more time. If we don't activate it now, they'll take it from us. They'll take everything." The human stared at the glowing artifact. The power it radiated was overwhelming, filling the room with an almost unbearable energy. He could feel it tugging at his very core, drawing him in, tempting him with its promise of untold power. But the fear of what would happen if they were wrong, if they miscalculated, if they lost control, kept him rooted in place. This wasn't just some relic. It was a weapon, a force that could alter the course of the universe. The alien woman stepped toward him, her movements swift and graceful despite the chaos around them. She reached out, her hand brushing lightly against his arm. Her touch was cold, but there was a sense of urgency in her eyes that burned with intensity. "Please," she pleaded, her voice soft but fierce. "You're the only one who can do this. The only one who can unlock its true power. I can't do it alone. You are the key. He looked into her eyes, searching for some sign of deceit, some hint that this was all a trap. But all he saw was fear, genuine, raw fear. She wasn't lying. She wasn't hiding anything. This was real. And they were running out of time. The low rumble of engines outside grew louder, drowning out all other sounds. The sound of metal scraping against metal filled the air, and the hum of energy from the artifact intensified, like a heartbeat growing stronger with every passing second. "They're here," she said, her voice now sharp with panic. "They've breached the perimeter. We have to move now." She didn't wait for a response. In a swift motion, she activated the controls on the pedestal, and the room seemed to come alive with energy. The artifact in the center of the room flared to life, its pulsating light filling every corner, casting a strange, otherworldly glow over everything. The walls of the chamber vibrated with the surge of power, and the very air seemed to crackle with raw, untamed energy. The human took a step back, his heart pounding in his chest. He could feel the pressure building, the weight of the decision pressing on him like 1,000 tons. If he helped her now, there would be no going back. The power of the artifact would be unleashed, and whatever happened next, there would be no turning back from it. But what choice did he have? The enemy was closing in, and if they didn't act, everything would be lost. His hand trembled as he reached out toward the artifact. He could feel the pull of it, like a gravitational force drawing him in, urging him to unleash its power. The moment his fingers brushed against the cool surface of the pedestal, a surge of energy shot through him, and his vision blurred. The room spun, and he felt as if he were falling into a void, surrounded by darkness. The alien woman's voice echoed in his mind, a whisper that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "You have to do it. Now." He gritted his teeth, focusing on the task at hand, forcing himself to ignore the overwhelming sensations swirling around him. He pressed his palm flat against the artifact, and in that moment, the world seemed to shift. The chamber exploded in light, a blinding flash that filled every inch of space. The human staggered back, his head spinning, but he didn't have time to react. The artifact had awakened, and with it, the full force of its power was unleashed. The alien woman staggered as well, her hand clutching the pedestal for support. She gasped, her body trembling as if the energy was too much for her to bear. "No," she whispered, her voice breaking. "This wasn't supposed to happen. The power, it's too much." The human's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean? What's happening?" Her eyes locked with his, filled with fear. "It's unstable. We've unleashed too much. We need to control it, or it will destroy everything." Before he could respond, the walls of the chamber cracked, a deep rumbling shaking the very foundation of the structure. The light from the artifact pulsed faster, its rhythm erratic, as if it were reacting to the chaos building around them. The sound of explosions echoed from outside the chamber, and the human could hear the distant roar of enemy forces closing in. They were almost here. If they didn't stop the artifact now, there would be no stopping the destruction that would follow. He rushed to the woman's side, grabbing her arm as the floor beneath them shook. "We have to shut it down. Now." She nodded, her face pale with fear, and together they rushed toward the pedestal. But it was already too late. The energy from the artifact had grown beyond their control. It was like a living entity, a force of nature that refused to be contained. The chamber was collapsing around them, and the human realized with a sinking feeling that they were about to face something far worse than just enemy invaders. They were about to face the consequences of unleashing the ancient power. In that moment, as the world around them descended into chaos, one thought echoed in his mind. Would they survive this, or had they just sealed their fate? The final showdown. The chamber was collapsing. The walls cracked and splintered as the power of the artifact surged uncontrollably. The light from the pedestal was now blinding. the raw energy twisting the very fabric of reality itself. The human could feel the ground tremble beneath his feet, every tremor sending waves of panic through him. The alien woman staggered to her feet, her face pale and her eyes wide with fear. She reached out toward the artifact, but the energy around it was too intense, too overwhelming. The power was thrumming like the pulse of a great heart, but it was rapidly losing control. It felt as if the room itself was alive, suffocating them both with the weight of its fury. "We have to stop it," she screamed, but her voice barely reached his ears over the deafening roar of energy that filled the room. The human clenched his fists, trying to steady his breath. He had never felt anything like this before. This sheer force, this raw, untamable power. It felt like it was consuming everything, bending the very laws of physics to its will. He grabbed her arm, pulling her away from the pedestal. "We need to get out of here. We can't control it. It's too powerful." But she resisted, her eyes locked on the artifact. "We can't leave. We can't just abandon it, or they'll take it. The power will be theirs to control. I promised my people I would protect it." Her words hit him like a blow. The last thing he wanted was to leave her alone, but he could see that she was slowly being consumed by the very thing she had hoped to control. Her connection to the artifact was deep, perhaps deeper than he had understood, but now it was becoming her undoing. Suddenly, the ground cracked beneath their feet, and the entire chamber lurched violently to the side. The lights flickered, and the walls buckled as the structure began to crumble. From the depths of the chaos, the human could hear the sound of distant footsteps. Heavy, mechanical. The enemy was here. They're here. The invasion force is inside. The alien woman shouted, her voice hoarse with urgency. The human's mind raced. They had mere moments before the entire place came down around them. He could hear the faint whine of enemy ships approaching the chamber, their engines echoing through the wreckage. They had no time to escape without confronting the forces that were closing in. Without thinking, the human turned toward the artifact once more. His heart was pounding in his chest, his mind desperate for an answer. He had no idea what the artifact was truly capable of, or if he had any hope of controlling it. But there was no other choice. "We have to use it," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. "We need to fight back. If we don't, they'll destroy everything." The alien woman looked at him, her face a mixture of disbelief and reluctant agreement. "You don't understand," she gasped, her voice shaky. "Using it now, without understanding its true nature, will destroy us all. We'll unleash a cataclysm that will wipe out everything in our path. Even if we survive, the consequences will be unimaginable." The human glanced back at her, his resolve hardening. He had no choice. The enemy was already inside, and they would take the artifact if they could. And if the artifact truly had the power to reshape the universe, then he would have to trust that it could help them survive this fight. "We'll never know if we don't try," he said, his voice unwavering as he stepped toward the pedestal once more. "It's now or never." The alien woman hesitated for only a moment before following him, her face filled with both fear and determination. Together, they approached the artifact, her hand trembling as she reached out to steady the pulsating energy. The moment her hand touched the artifact, the ground beneath them cracked open, and the room was filled with a deafening roar. It felt as if the very universe itself had begun to fold in on them, and for a split second, the human thought they had made a terrible mistake. But then, something incredible happened. The energy from the artifact surged outward, surrounding them both in a brilliant, radiant light. The air crackled with power, and the world around them seemed to vanish, leaving only the artifact's raw energy between them. Time itself seemed to freeze. The human senses were overwhelmed by the sheer force of the power, and for a moment, he thought he might lose himself in it. But then the power shifted. The light dimmed, and the energy settled, coalescing into a steady, pulsing rhythm. The artifact no longer threatened to destroy everything. It was as if it had found its balance, a calm within the chaos. And in that moment, the human realized something. They had done it. They had harnessed its power, just long enough to survive. Through the chaos, the enemy forces advanced, but they weren't prepared for what was about to happen. The alien woman's voice rang out through the tumult, her tone steady and filled with purpose. "It's time to end this." She raised her hand toward the entrance, and the artifact responded. A wave of energy shot through the chamber, sending a pulse of raw power surging outward. The entire room was bathed in light, and the enemy forces, those who had come to seize the artifact, were engulfed in the blast. The human stood frozen, his breath shallow, watching as the enemy was pushed back by the sheer force of the artifact's energy. The once vibrant chamber was now a battlefield, but the battle was won before it even began. The alien woman had done it. She had harnessed the artifact's power, and now the tide was turning in their favor. But as the last of the enemy forces were driven back, the human knew that this was only the beginning. The artifact had given them a victory, but it was also a reminder of how fragile their existence truly was. It was a power too dangerous to wield lightly. And now, they would have to decide what to do with it. With the danger averted, the alien woman turned to him, her face pale but resolute. "We've won, for now, but this is far from over. The galaxy will know of what we've done today, and there will be others who will come for it." The human nodded, knowing that the real battle had just begun. The artifact had shown them its power, but would they be able to control it, or would it be their downfall? As the dust settled and the wreckage of the chamber filled the air, one question remained. What now? A life-changing discovery. The chamber was eerily still now, the chaos and destruction of moments ago fading into a tense silence. The walls were cracked, parts of the structure had collapsed, but the artifact remained intact, its power still pulsing with a steady, almost soothing rhythm. The alien woman stood in front of it, her face a mix of awe and exhaustion. She had saved them. She had wielded the artifact's unimaginable power and protected them, but at what cost? The human took a step toward her, his eyes scanning the room, still filled with the faint remnants of energy. His heart was still pounding in his chest, and his mind was racing with the events that had just unfolded. They had faced impossible odds, and against all expectations, they had survived. But the victory felt hollow. What had they truly gained? What had they unlocked by unleashing such raw, uncontrollable power? "You did it," he said, his voice filled with both admiration and lingering uncertainty. We did it, but I don't know what we've just awakened." She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she turned her gaze toward the artifact, her expression unreadable. The weight of everything that had just transpired hung heavily between them. She had unlocked the artifact's power, but at what cost? How much control did they truly have over it? "I don't know," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I thought I understood it. I thought we could use it, control it. But now I'm not sure what we've done." Her words hit him harder than any battle or confrontation they had just endured. There was no turning back. They had unleashed a force that could change everything, destroy everything, if they were not careful. The artifact wasn't just a weapon. It was a force of nature, something beyond their comprehension. "But we've survived," the human said, his voice steadying. "We've won. And now we know that we can control it. We have to, or we'll lose everything." She turned to face him, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that left him breathless. "You don't understand. It's not about control. It's about balance. We've only just begun to see the true power of the artifact. We've awakened something ancient, something that has been dormant for centuries. And now, the universe is watching. There will be consequences. There always are." Her words sent a chill through him, but he didn't look away. There was no denying the truth in her words. This was just the beginning. The artifact had given them a victory, but it was also a powerful reminder of the dangerous path they had just walked. "Then what do we do?" he asked, feeling the weight of their responsibility settle on his shoulders. How do we make sure this doesn't destroy us all? For the first time since they had met, the alien woman smiled, though it was a bittersweet smile, full of understanding and resolve. We must learn. We must understand the artifact, its true purpose, and we must protect it from those who would misuse it. The human nodded. He had come here expecting an adventure, a simple mission to help an alien woman in need. But he had found something much greater, and far more dangerous than he could have ever imagined. This artifact wasn't just a relic or a weapon. It was the key to something far larger than the two of them. "We'll need help," he said, his voice filled with certainty. "We can't do this alone." "Yes," she agreed, her gaze shifting toward the shattered remains of the chamber. "There are others who will come, who will seek to use the artifact for their own purposes, but there are also those who will fight to protect it. We must find them, and we must prepare." As they stood together, in the quiet aftermath of the battle, the human realized something profound. This was more than just about saving this alien world. It was about something much larger. The artifact had connected them, not just to the galaxy's most powerful forces, but to a greater destiny. A destiny that would shape the future of the entire universe. With a deep breath, he turned toward the exit, the alien woman at his side. The battle was over for now, but the war was far from finished. They had uncovered the truth about the artifact, but there was so much more to discover. And the galaxy, with all its mysteries and dangers, was waiting for them. "Let's go," he said, his voice steady. "The universe isn't going to wait." And together, they stepped into the unknown, the first chapter of their journey just beginning. The power of the artifact had been unleashed, but what lay ahead, what choices they would make, would decide the fate of not just this planet, but of the entire galaxy. The human had discovered something far greater than he had ever imagined. But now, the real journey began.